Some of you will be aware of the ancient story of Adam and Eve in the garden, and the serpent that comes along and tries to convince them to eat of a fruit they were told not to eat. And it's really interesting to observe the social dynamics in that little story, however you want to understand it. But the serpent seeks to blame God, and that sets up a chain of blaming that goes on. So the serpent says, God told you this, but that's not true. He's holding out on you. Adam and Eve take the fruit and they eat it. And then when God comes along to talk with them about that, they blame one another. So Adam blames Eve and Eve blames the snake. And of course the snake didn't have a leg to stand on. Boom, boom. As we look at the way COVID-19 is spreading around the world and the way world leaders and governments are responding to that challenge, it's interesting to see the ones who are doing something about it in terms of trying to get through the crisis, and others who are seeking to blame. It's an old habit that dies hard. We'd rather not be responsible and rather not be in trouble for something, so if at all possible we will deflect and point the finger at somebody else. But that doesn't actually give you traction for getting through the issue. About 2,000 years ago, a man who was universally acclaimed to be a good fella, somebody who did kind things and didn't deceive anybody about anything, came and walked amongst the people in Palestine. And the authorities of the day, both religious and civil, decided that that was not an acceptable thing, and he was lynched effectively, put to death. And in that moment, as people came to see a good man being put to death, it became apparent that the way of deflecting and blaming someone who isn't actually responsible or guilty is a way of keeping the best things away from ourselves. So in theological terms, it was seen that by blaming God, we kind of keep ourselves away from God. All this time we thought God was rejecting us, and in actual fact, we just haven't had the courage to believe that we could be in the presence of God and not be condemned. And so when God comes amongst us in the person of Jesus and is with us, we find that really hard to take and put him up on the cross. And you can see how destructive the whole blame thing is in your personal relationships, for example. If you're close to somebody and there's a disagreement and all you can do is blame the other person, the situation is not resolvable. And even if you win your argument, you don't develop intimacy if all the time you're pushing against somebody. The thing to do is to find a way through, to see the issues as clearly as possible and deal with them in an environment of grace and acceptance and love. And that's what we're invited to do. And it'll be interesting to continue to watch the way governments deal with the pandemic crisis. Those who decide their determination is to find a way through, I'm sure will succeed. And those who seek to blame and deflect, they'll succeed at blaming and deflecting, but that won't be so good for their people and their populations. So think on these things as we watch the events unfold in the coming days. God bless.